Part 2.
Heat and cold. One day, heat and cold came to the conclusion that they were too far apart. Coexistence is the answer, they resolved. Both of them thought that the new arrangement was fine, and they huddled together, mutually comforting, until each heard someone say, "Isn't it strange that nothing is hot nor cold these days? The only temperature that seems to exist is warmth." So they separated, and the only warmth to be found after that was in things not yet hot or on the way to becoming cold. Inspirations. People who speak or act in an ordinary fashion are most likely to be those who have been the recipients of higher experiences. But because these do not rage around wild-eyed, people think that they are very ordinary folk and therefore not aware of anything unknown to the general run of man. Local and real truth. The existence of relative truth does not prove the non-existence of universal truth. A hare. There once was a hare who was proud that he had such fine long ears. He realized, however, that the tips became icy on very cold days. So he decided to keep his eyes open all the time so that he would see the cold coming in time to avoid it. Attention. People demand attention. The right kind of attention at suitable times leads to the maintenance of a thriving individual. Ignorance of attention need leads to too much or too little intake of attention. Ignorance of the attention factor, too, leads to mistaking attention demand for something else. This something else is the social, psychological, or other ritual which people think is the essential reason for human contact. In fact, it is only one ingredient of human contact and interchange. It is a basic error to imagine that only a human being can be involved in the attention situation. Some of the most important attention situations concern real or imagined sources of attention other than human ones. Freedom. "I always looked at the alternatives," said the sheep. "I can munch, or I can bite." Generalizations are perilous. It is often stated that generalizations are dangerous. This is true, but only when it is true. Generalizations are useful, even essential in certain situations, dangerous in others. To say motor cars are dangerous is useful for a child for a period of its life. After that, it may become a barrier to crossing the road. At that point, other generalizations are supplied to protect the child for a period or to carry it a stage further towards learning. A huge area of human life and thought requires the intelligent use of generalizations, which includes using them, modifying them, and superseding them. Arms and legs. Many people who cannot reach higher think that their arms should be longer. In some cases, you can see that it is their legs which are too short. Function. "To think I never realized what a good doorstop I'd make," said the heavy book to itself, settling down. Adult toddlers. Many problems arise in certain cultures because numerous adults behave like infants, while it is part of the convention to treat such behavior as that of adults. But parents would not allow it in their own children. These people are still educable, even though their education might have to be similar to that given to children. We make few facile assumptions about natural or basic knowledge being already in children. Oddly, we assume that adults know a lot of things which they do not. Presence and absence. A certain person may have, as you say, a wonderful presence. I do not know. What I do know is that he has a perfectly delightful absence. Carpenter's shop. I went into a carpenter's shop. "Why is your door broken?" I said. "Oh, people come to a carpenter to have their own work done, not to ask about his," he said. Some time later, I saw another carpenter in his workshop. "Why has your table only 3 legs?" I asked. "Oh, I hadn't noticed that," he said. And there was, on another occasion, another woodworker. "Your window frame is splintered and has been so for some time," I told him. "I'm too busy to mend it," he answered. "I've been making chairs for sale." Comprehension. Man does not have a capacity of instant comprehension. So rare is the knowledge of how to train this, that most people, and almost all institutions, have compromised by playing upon man's proneness to conditioning and indoctrination instead. The end of that road is the ant-heap, or at best, the beehive. The nail. A man and a nail had a conversation. The nail said, "I have often wondered during my years sticking here in this panel what my fate is to be." The man said, "Latent in your situation may be a tearing out with pincers, a burning of wood and a fall, the rotting of the plank, so many things." Said the nail, "I should have known better than to ask such foolish questions. Nobody can foresee even one thing that might happen in the future, let alone a variety of them, and also very different and unlikely." And he waited, having learnt this nail wisdom, until someone else should come along, someone who would talk intelligently and not threaten him. Study. The practice of study only too often makes people mere repeaters and producers of clichés and sayings. Such study has been all but wasted. But the product has taken the form in which we find it, because it is an unsuitable graft upon an unprepared basis. Original perfection. He was yellow, plump and soft, his surface broken up, the movements ungainly, full of uncertainty, covetousness, and hunger. His main desire was to attain a state in which he would want nothing, need to make no movement, present a smooth, uniform, and delicately satisfying face to the world. He did not realize that he was a chicken who wanted to be an egg. Humility. Humility cannot be taught by propaganda, though slavery can. Shouting for humility is a form of arrogance. One of my most abiding recollections is of a priest at a religious occasion once roaring, in the most threatening way imaginable, "Oh, our Lord God, we most humbly pray." Real humility is not always the same as apparent humility. Remember that fighting against self-conceit is still fighting, and that it will tend to suppress it temporarily. It does not cure anything. Remember, too, that humility itself does not bring an automatic reward. It is a means to an end. It enables a person to operate in a certain manner. Wasps. A king who feared wasps once decreed that they were abolished. As it happened, they did him no harm, but he was eventually stung to death by scorpions. Different and the same. Supposing for a moment that you were not yourself, but a visitor among men, ignorant of their ways of behaving and their elaborate habits of self-deception. One of the first things which you would notice is that a large part of people's time is spent in thinking and acting just like other people, while at the same time they energetically claim that they are different. You would conclude that this predilection stemmed from a warp of thinking, and was a serious barrier to making use even of the things which they do understand. It gives rise to one of the major customs of the human tribe. Let's pretend, and let's forget that we are pretending, so that we can then conscientiously deny it. Choice. The word choice is a fraud, while people choose only what they have been taught to choose. Occasion. A man called Islam found himself one day following what he took to be a wedding procession. He called out, "Rejoice for this happy occasion!" But, since it was a funeral, the mourners took hold of him and objected strenuously. "What was the right thing to say?" he asked. "You should have said, 'Mercy upon you,'" they replied. Soon afterwards another procession came along, while Islam was still memorizing his line. "Mercy upon him," he cried. But it was a wedding party, and the guests took him severely to task, saying, "Learn that you should have been saying, 'What an auspicious occasion.'" They coached him in this phrase until he was word perfect, and then they let him go. Another party of people approached him, and he called out, "What an auspicious occasion!" They were furious. "We are lost, and do not know the way, and you call that an auspicious occasion?" So they beat him a little. Then they said, "Can you tell us the way to such and such a place?" "I'm a stranger here myself," said Islam. They rained blows upon him, afterwards explaining, "We don't use the word stranger. It is unlucky." "Well then," he said, "I'm not a stranger." At the word stranger, they fell to beating him again. Then the police arrived. They took him to court and had him fined, because in that town a person who was not a stranger, and who did not direct honest travellers, was guilty of a crime. "This is the place for me," said Islam aloud, when he was released, "because I am learning so many things that I did not know before." But someone overheard, and he was arrested again, because according to the traditions of that country, it was both socially and legally wrong to say, "This is the place for me." As soon as he was let out of the court, Islam exclaimed, "This is not the place for me." So they took him and imprisoned him for saying things critical of the community or likely to cause social dissatisfaction. Subordinates. Almost every day I am reminded of Sadi's reflection that there is no senseless tyranny like that of subordinates. The Lizard and the Spider. A lizard and a spider met. The lizard said, "What do you eat?" And the spider replied, "Flies." "So do I," said the lizard. "It seems that we are suitable companions." They set up house together. One night they were out catching flies. A cat approached. In the instant before it pounced on him, the lizard cried to the spider, "A cat is going to catch me, what shall I do?" The spider called back, "Just spin out some web and make your escape into this tiny hole where I am." While the lizard was trying to understand this, the cat caught him. Unknown. There are literally thousands of wise people, unknown to the ordinary man. They teach in a manner which is not recognized as teaching by the herd. They continuously influence man. People who respond to authority figures and weird things are unable to make any contact with them. Other people lack information and preparation. Report on the planet Earth. A body of celestial beings, who wanted to develop their influence upon the people of the earth, commissioned an experienced and independent investigator to provide them with a feasibility report. When he came back, he said, "Here is a complete analysis of the situation. To get through to mankind, you must promise happiness to those who are sad, and threaten with distress those who are happy. They are all to be exposed to tension, anxiety, joy, and repetition. They must be induced to think, when they are hypocrites, that they are honest and straightforward. You will also sanctify self-indulgent by making people enjoy suffering, and then tell them that they are not enjoying it because it is a punishment." "But this is terrible," exclaimed the celestial ones. "We could never do that, to turn people into automata to manipulate them." "Now listen," said the expert. "Do you or do you not want to extend your territory? If you plan expansion in this field, you must remember that, for thousands of years, your competitors have been ahead of you. They are well established there, and they are successful. In fact, there are only a very few, quite insignificant exceptions."